For me, art is not just a practice. For me, art is a way of life. I made this film we are going to see in some wilderness in America, and it's called Runner. Let's have a look. My films are playful and psychogeographical. They are made to found film sets on the street and in the countryside. The performance is site-specific and it's always in conversation with the medium of film. And I've shared these films online as intervention on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and recently in museums and galleries, including the Venice Biennale 2015. I want to talk with you about what keeps me running, and that's the gift, and the importance of play in gift giving. This is a philosophy in Malawi we call Nyau. I grew up in Malawi, that's a tiny country in southern Africa. According to the World Bank Development Index 2016, Malawi is the poorest country on earth at the moment. I find that very interesting, wouldn't you? I mean, why would you want to be mediocre? As far as I'm concerned, there are only two interesting countries on earth at the moment, and that's Luxembourg. This is the richest country on earth with the GDP per capita of $100,000, and Malawi, the poorest country on earth with a GDP per capita of $200. The guy in Luxembourg is some 500 times richer than the guy in Malawi. I wonder how the guy in Luxembourg managed that. Does anybody know how Luxembourg got rich? Is it oil, or I don't know how countries get rich, but I can tell you for sure how Malawi remains poor. And that's because Malawi is a gift-giving country, a gift-giving society, if you like. The economy of the country is set around the circulation of gifts rather than the selling of commodities. So it's not necessarily a negative that Malawi is the poorest country on earth. In Malawi, to be a good person, Muntwabwino, is much more important than to be rich. Now, a good person in Malawi is not necessarily the one who reads the Bible every day or prays like Mother Teresa. A good person in Malawi is simply the one who knows how to give a gift. My mother was very expensive while she lived because she liked giving gifts. You can see she's there in white on the left-hand corner, and on her right is her husband. He liked giving too. When I was growing up, he was fond of giving drunken lectures on philosophy, which have continued to influence me as an artist today. So if I say anything untoward, don't blame me. You can blame my father then. Well, when I started working, I would send money to my mother, and she would quickly give it away to relatives, friends, and beggars who came to our house in Lilongwe. Anybody who went to our house got something. So my brothers and sisters had to work so hard, very hard, to keep her happy. Well, she died in 2002, a poor woman, poor but proud, as the most prodigious gift giver in the neighborhood. But I think that's because she lived in town. You see, if she had stayed in the village, whenever she gave, other people would have given her back. The problem with giving in town, that people took advantage of her generosity. Her story, I think, is very much a story of Africa. Generosity now in Africa only brings misery, so we Africans have to think carefully what it means to give. Well, for a start, I can tell you that a gift is not an easy thing to give. When you give something, people secretly resent you because you put them under obligation to return that gift. Unless, of course, they are profiteers, and they will keep coming to get your gifts until they squeeze you dry, you know. Isn't that what capitalism is about? Well, the problem of giving has taxed many philosophers in history, The French philosopher I have concluded, after studying various gift-giving societies around the world, that a gift, in fact, demanded reciprocity, a return. It's not the sentimental present or charity which is one-sided and highlights the donor's impotency. I would say that aid agencies who work in Africa at the moment are naive in some way. They don't realize that by going to Africa and just giving things to Africans without allowing Africans to return the generosity, that in the long run only leads to resentment rather than gratefulness. Now, the problem with reciprocity is that it can quickly lead to cynicism. We think of, let's say, Facebook. Whenever you start liking people's stuff, they like your stuff back. When you stop liking their stuff, they stop liking your stuff. So reciprocity can quickly lead to a certain kind of cynicism and pettiness. Well, in Malawi, we have a solution to a problem of giving, and that's to give through play, a philosophy we call Nyau. And this kind of plays for adults. I'm not talking about children's play. Children can play anyhow anyway, but the business of playing is very difficult for grown-ups. So what the Chewama tribe uses, they use masks. When the masks come out, people are more relaxed and they imagine themselves as higher beings, something bigger than life. And they start giving indifferently. And they also start taking indifferently. And by end of the day, by end of what we call Gule Wankulu Festival, that's orchestrated by these masks, nobody feels indebted or obliged. It's like if you go to a party, you can drink anyhow without feeling obliged to your friend, but if you, maybe you are two of you go to a bar, you start drinking, you feel you're obliged that you have to buy each other's drinks. Anyway, so in play, a gift can be given without incurring a debt. And long after the masks have left, what we call Gule Wankulu, the great play, a collection of masks, which sometimes can include what you wear on the face or an animal structure. When they are left, they leave behind generous personalities. That's why we Africans like to dress up. So many dandies in Africa, because for us, every day is an occasion for play. We are ready to give a gift. And you can see here my father at yet another party with a friend. Well, what's happening here is playful personality extended to basically to other Malawians. Malawians, a welcoming lot, a friendly lot, and part of their playfulness, of their character comes from this phenomenon of masks. At the moment, we have the masks, Gule Wankulu, as a UNESCO World Heritage, and from 2005, I think. And that means this philosophy now of gift giving through play belongs to all of us here. So we have to know what it means to give through play and why it is important to give through play. Well, when I was growing up, these sort of masks had been moved to museums, and what was left in Africa was marginalized. Was no longer. Traditionally, masks, this is another example of a mask, Elvis, a Chewa mask. They would be at the center of society, infrastructure. But now they are more tourist curiosities. But it didn't mean that mask making died in Africa with marginalization of these masks. It moved elsewhere. And one place where you could find it when I was growing up in Malawi was cinema. Now, the kind of cinema I watched growing up in the late 70s was improvised from foreign reels. And basically, this phenomenon started because a lot of the films that came to Africa, like many things, were secondhand. The projectors would break down all the time. And so the projectionists had to find a way of entertaining people with broken down projectors. They would change the reels, they would fast forward them, they would heavily edit them. And the kind of film they were looking for is for non-linear film. A lot of films coming from the West tend to be linear. You have to wait there for 2 hours to find out what happens at the end. In Africa, you won't have that patience, because the conception of time in Africa is nonlinear. And nonlinear time is also preferred because it's conducive to play. And so when these films played, they served the same function that masks served in the village. This sense of play was inspired by going to the movies, and again, the playfulness that was generated there was taken into the everyday life. And play generated into the everyday life means that people were generally more generous than they would be without gifts, without play. Well, I've been inspired by this Nyau cinema of my childhood to make films. And the film I first showed you at the beginning is inspired by this nonlinear time, this aesthetic of broken down film. And I have traveled the world now showing my films, as I say, at Venice Biennale, for instance. And along with these films, I also show playful works, installations, in which play is welcomed. And when people come to my show, they again play as if they're at a Nyau festival, if you like. And I make new connections, I make new friendships. This is The Last Judgment at Venice. And another work, I did a project I did at Yale University based on a research on an Italian situationist. And so I want to, maybe we have time to see another film. This is Pickpocket. I made this one in London. And basically, as I say, my films are just made spontaneously. I was walking down the street one time with a friend, and we saw a man who appeared to be like from the 19th century, wearing the same coat as me from the 21st century, and I followed him down the street. And this kind of encounter created this film called Pickpocket, which ended up on Facebook, eventually in a gallery, and then maybe an art festival like Venice Biennale. So that's what pickpocketing looks like in London at the moment. Now you may ask yourself, what is a gift if not a present or charity? Well, according to the French philosopher Georges Bataille, he says that the gift is excess in systems, the surplus wealth that has to be spent without return if the carrying capacity of that system is to be sustained. A lot of the world's problems today can be blamed on the fact that the world, in fact, has too much. Generally, the picture we are given in the days of capital is that the world, there are wars because there's a scarce of resources on earth, but actually it's the opposite. A lot of problems that we have in the world at the moment, it's because we have too much. The world has accumulated too much, and this is creating all sorts of kinds of problems. Capitalism, with its tendency to accumulate, can be seen as a constipated system that has forgotten how to give. And this amnesia, if you like, can only lead to catastrophe. Now we speak of environmental catastrophes, the problem of refugees, global warming. This could be all simply because the world has forgotten what it means to give. Well, I think perhaps the work of the artist today is to remind people what it means to give. Thank you very much. Thank you.